All right, folks. I had an entirely different plan for today's live stream than I ended up doing right now because our beloved rulers can't help but mock things. Before we get to that, something more important. A in traditional circles, sort of a quiet icon has passed away, and that's Dr. Wolfgang Smith. He's gone to our Lord. If you don't know who he was, Dr. Smith was an Austrian mathematician, physicist, philosopher of science, metaphysician, and a traditional Catholic. Back in the 1990s, when he was considering converting to Catholicism, he and Father Malachi Martin had a series of letters discussing the faith. In fact, they wrote so many letters that it was turned into a book. I'm not going to bring the book up on screen. If you put his name and Malachi Martin into an Amazon or other publisher search engine, you'll find a copy of it. The letters were actually never publicized at the time in any way. Nobody knew about them except for people close to either of the figures until fairly recently, long after Father Malachi Martin's mysterious passing. You can read the book for yourself, gives you a different kind of insight into both figures, you can find it on Amazon or wherever. But please pray for the repose of the soul of Dr. Wolfgang Smith. That's the most important thing we'll talk about right now. That having been said, y'all didn't tune in today to hear me talk about Father Wolfgang Smith, so we will go to our initial story. I had originally planned to talk about a hilarious own goal that the Vatican had yesterday, but instead we have to start with this. The 2024 Summer Olympics have started. And I honestly don't pay that much attention to the games anymore since, like everything else in life, they've gotten political and weirdly pagan. And especially in their opening ceremonies, really. And I know I'm not alone in this either. Since at least the 2016 Olympic Games, the TV and internet ratings for the games have steadily declined, like so many other things in life. They've often been criticized for a lack of spectacle in their opening events. In 2012, the games had some, we'll say, weird symbolic stuff going on that some have said was symbolic of what would happen in 2020. But I don't think that was the intention because I don't give our rulers that much credit. and the but they there was said that it was a symbolic of the affliction that rocked the world later on. But in general, the opening games have been criticized by Christians for being a little weirdly pagan and by everybody else for having a lack of spectacle or anything to draw viewers to the games. And their ratings have declined steadily. France obviously took that to heart, so that their opening games in Paris were marked by a symphonic extreme heavy metal band, followed by opera and classical music mixed in with the usual fanfare. Now, that might be enough to raise a few eyebrows. It certainly is spectacle. But I'm not talking about that when I'm talking about the influence of Satan. Instead, the world was treated to the full display of Catholicism being mocked in actual imagery from the Apocalypse of St. John, aka the Book of Revelation, being invoked in the games. So let me show you what we're talking about here. This I'm going to play for you without the audio because it is definitely copyrighted. But so you see, for those who aren't aware, that is a mockery of the Last Supper. One Twitter user tweeted out a screenshot. Another Twitter user tweeted out a screenshot because we're actually gonna get that off the screen at this point. You get the idea. There's also a lot more people present there than at the actual Last Supper, and that's actually kind of important to remember here. But this person here tweeted out a screenshot, which it might be easier to imbibe of. Tag Dr. Taylor Marshall, myself, Catholic Arena, and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops in it. They asked the rhetorical question, because we know the answer. Do you think we'll ever hear from Pope Francis on this outright mocking of our faith? Will he make any condemnation of blasphemy? What say you, USCCB? I gave the pithy reply he won't criticize his allies. So, and that's, look, we know that Francis gets very, 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 very cozy with the secularists. And the answer, again, I say no because he doesn't go after his allies and his co-religionists like that. He's used their slogans. He's had their representatives at the Vatican and hosted their conferences. Why would he criticize his co-religionists? But he wants some details about the actual event itself. We go to Fox News, who I don't usually cite very often. He gives this headline: Olympics opening ceremony sparks outrage with confused men parodying Last Supper. Gone completely woke. This was extremely disrespectful to Christians, Elon Musk wrote, who is himself not a Christian. Though he's given hints that he might be kind of flirting with the idea. Pray for the conversion of Elon Musk. If, I mean, can you imagine what would happen aside from his, you know, the possibility of his soul being saved and all the things we should worry about primarily? You also imagine just the reaction it would have if he actually converted. So pray for the repose of, not the repose, but his conversion. Okay. Now, again, this article, much like this video that I'm live streaming to you now, is preaching to the choir on this subject because, Fox knows whose its audience is. But here is a summation of this. Quote, the 2024 Olympics opening ceremony in Paris has sparked international outrage with confused men dressed against nature, themed imagery of religious and historical figures. In between listing all the countries participating in the Olympic Games, there have been several performances riffing on France's history and culture. Sarah, such as Marie Antoinette with no head, the last queen prior to be taken out by the lawless state amid French Revolution, singing with her head in her hands, sporting confused makeup. Yeah, that actually happened. And yes, I'm playing with the language used here because I can't even show you a picture of that on YouTube, let alone describe it graphically. So, and I'm not, and good taste requires that I don't necessarily show you everything that they did. But this is part of the confused men that appeared to be a recurring theme throughout the ceremonies. 3 such men were among the 10,000 torchbearers who relayed the Olympic flame as it started in Greece, passed through French territories, and made its way to Paris. One new display on Friday showed what appeared to be numerous performers, including the very confused and a large woman in a bejeweled halo crown parodying The Last Supper, a universally recognizable painting by Renaissance artist and Italian Leonardo da Vinci of Christ and his apostles. Many internationally known political figures, particularly from American politics, condemn the display as a sign of the cultural rot in Western civilization. And I'll show you a couple of them here because they did include a couple here. So there's Riley Gaines saying, saying Riley Gaines kind of things. I'm pointing out how this is front and center at the Olympic Games, and does not want anyone to tell her that the group doing this is oppressed or marginalized ever again. And then Elon Musk, as I mentioned before, chiming in using his giant platform, which is actually more popular now than it has ever been before, to put out a counter narrative, which is not a bad thing. But you kind of get the idea here. And I'm less concerned actually about the confused men participating because I expected that. I was not surprised in the slightest, since our rulers are expected to put that garbage front and center now and moving forward forever. If it had just been that, I'd have made a passing quip about it in the normal live stream that I had made plans for this morning, but that would be about it. Instead, the French decided to mock the Last Supper, using Leonardo da Vinci's iconic painting as their inspiration. Now, have you noticed you don't get these followers of Satan attacking Protestantism? Not in ways like this. They don't mock Protestant imagery, such as it is. They go after the Catholic Church. You see it in the Black Mass. You see it in parodies of sacred imagery, like what we're talking about here. They know that the Catholic Church is the real deal. That's why the followers of Satan go after the Catholic Church first and foremost. They really know it's the authentic thing, which is why they attack Catholicism so openly and so blatantly. Now, there's also some unintentional imagery here that I found just a little bit interesting. And I kept it down to here. That's Celine Dion. I'm just going to say, if you remember Celine Dion, don't you? That sang that song from Titanic. That I'm not one usually to comment on appearances. Really, I'm not, but that's actually relevant here. She looks more like the demons that fly around an unidentified aerial phenomenon, right? That people claim to see. Then she does anything like, well, she doesn't look well, I guess is what I'm saying. I pray for her, please. Again, I don't like commenting on people's appearance. It's kind of unfortunate that you have to have that. I don't know. She just does. That was the thing I noticed was, I don't know if it's just the makeup choices or if there's something else going on. Pray for her. She does not look particularly healthy. That was one thing I noticed about all this as well. And then we can go now talk briefly about the director of this, because nobody really knows much about this guy. name is Thomas
active
Jolly.
ETFs.
He's
Before
the
investing in
Olympics
any
art
exchange traded
director, and he
fund,
was
you
the
should
one
consider its
responsible for the
investment
Last Supper.
objectives, risks, charges,
And
and expenses. Contact
I
your
could
dealer
tell you,
for a
like, people have
prospectus and
commented on
offering
like this
circular
picture,
or,
how
if
it looks
available, a
sinister.
summary prospectus containing this
It could be
information.
just
Read
what he
it
was going
carefully.
for.
While
I mean, I
active
could take a
ETFs
picture that
offer
makes
the
me look
potential to
sinister.
outperform an
But
index,
he's the
these
artistic
products may more
director for the Paris
significantly trail an
2024
index as
Olympic
compared
Games.
with passive ETFs.
And
The
he chose
Diamond
not to have a
Brokerage Services
traditional
LLC, member
romanticized portrayal of
NYSE
Paris found in
SIPC.
movies. He wanted to capture the lively, youthful energy of the city, hence the heavy metal band, hence all the confusion being put on front and center. He's also a big ally of the James Martin crowd and may actually be a member of it himself. So that makes it not at all surprising either. Now, you might expect there was some response to this on social media. I'm going to start with this one here, posted by somebody I don't usually reference much, Sasha and Rose, but Marion Marachel, who's a French Catholic politician, not looking terribly pleased, says to all the Christians of the world who are watching Paris 2024 ceremony and felt insulted by this parody of the Last Supper, know that it is not France that is speaking, but a left-wing minority ready for any provocation. And she would know if you've been following the events in Paris and in France in their politics lately. There have been, but that's not the um, only response. That statement, like what you're about to hear from Harrison Butker, is also an understatement. So go to Deadline, who gives us a headline we have to be careful with here, but it's Kansas City Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker calls confused men channeling the Last Supper at Olympics opening ceremony crazy. Again, an understatement, to put it mildly. But here's what they say. And this is like they sprinkle what he actually said throughout a lot of the article because there's not enough story here for a 2-word tweet. They give you way too much about the background here. But here's what basically is what they said. Quote, Harrison Butker is reacting to the Olympic Games opening ceremony in Paris and is having an issue with a group of confused men that appeared during the show. The Kansas City Chiefs kicker shared his opinion on social media after a clip of a group of such men channeled the Last Supper during the opening ceremony for the Olympics in Paris. This is crazy, Butker posted on his Instagram stories along with a screenshot of the scene. Butker then cited Galatians 6, verse 7. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. End quote. I'll tell you, he goes on to reiterate the Quasi controversy. In fact, that's what most of the article is about, that Butker found himself involved in during the spring when he spoke the truth at a Catholic college's commencement, which secularists are still demanding he get fired over. Whenever his name comes up at all, they're going to demand he be fired. With football season around the corner, they're going to demand he be fired anytime he makes ESPN, which is going to be pretty frequently since he's in the top 1% of the players in the NFL. But this all reminded me of something from history that no one in Catholic world talks about enough. And here's what that reminded me of. See, back in the French Revolution, um, the the church was essentially outlawed. There were some bishops who went along with things, but it was mostly outlawed. And the Robespierre and crowd essentially tried to institute a new goddess for France, the goddess of reason. Go here to encyclopedia.com because they give you a much better concise explanations than I could myself. So here's what they say. The following of the goddess of reason was a civic naturalistic religion of the French Revolution, dedicated to the worship of reason and liberty and intended as a substitute for Christianity. The Paris Commune, under the leadership of Pierre Shawnee, inaugurated the following with a ceremony in the Cathedral of Notre Dame on the 10th of November, 1793, 3 days after Jean Gobel, the constitutional bishop of the capital, had been induced to abdicate his priesthood. So yes, Jean Gobel was a bishop who went along with the new rulers of France, but they got him to abdicate his priesthood. Incredible. In the cathedral, a shrine was built in honor of reason and liberty. In front of the choir, a sacred mountain was constructed, surmounted by a small Greek temple in honor of philosophy. Surrounding were busts representing leading figures in the Enlightenment, probably Montesquieu, Rousseau, Voltaire, and Benjamin Franklin. A young opera singer, whose name remains uncertain, posed as Liberty and was dubbed Goddess of Reason. A flame, symbolic of truth, burned on an altar, while white-clad young girls wearing tricolored sashes, representative of allegiance to the Republic, carried torches up and down the sacred mountain. Meanwhile, the congregation sang Andreas Chanier's hymn, Come Holy Liberty, dwell in this temple, become the goddess of the French people. You get the idea. This is nothing new. in France. This is really nothing new. In fact, y'all might be aware that Pope Francis has very similar rhetoric. The slogan of the French Revolution was liberty, equality, and fraternity. Francis put out a papal encyclical with that in the title in his Fratelli Tutti document, which invoked those as values of Catholicism now. He repeats it all the time. It's the rallying cry of the French Revolution and is apparently the rallying cry of the Synod of Synodality. So don't be surprised when you see the sort of overlap with, we'll call it the synodal church and this abomination we saw last night at the Olympics. So no, I will not be purposely watching the Olympics this year. If I'm at the gym and I'm doing some lifting and I look over at the TV and I see highlights from, a couple of sports I like, I'll probably watch it without realizing what's going on. And then once I figure out, oh, wait, that's the Olympics, go back to doing what I'm doing. But I'm not going to go and turn on any of the games, even for the sports I like, not while this kind of stuff is happening. I'm not calling for, some organized boycott thing, but there's really no reason why a Catholic should be watching something that mocks the Last Supper. And they even had imagery from I forgot to show it on screen, but they even had a pale horse, behold a pale horse from Revelation. They included all of that as well. Now, we'll pivot here for the palate cleanser, as I promised. This is a palate cleanser story. I was actually going to just lead with this, but you all might be aware that on Facebook and Twitter, the Synod.va shared a poll. They've since deleted it, and we'll talk about that. But here's what it said. It said, do you believe that synodality as a path of conversion and reform can enhance the mission and participation of all the baptized? 7,000 votes, 88% said no. Now, this is Twitter, and it happened on Facebook too, similar numbers. So don't be surprised. That's not exactly, we'll say, representative of reality. Never take a Twitter poll you see about anything terribly seriously, except maybe about people's opinion on Twitter, because then it's Twitter users talking about what they think of the new Twitter. But this was funny. I mean, this was hysterical, right? And so we get, Eric Sam is saying, of course, the synodal poll was deleted because they did delete it. The irony is that the church doesn't determine what she believes by popular vote, but synodality essentially tries to do just that. In reality, it's a smokescreen because when the vote doesn't go the predetermined way, it's ignored. And that's exactly what happened here. The official account of the synod was like, oh, we don't like this. They got caught, by the way, on Facebook voting in their own poll. Michael Hitchborn caught them doing that. And I just found that hysterical. And there's a bunch of this. If we want to get a better look at the poll itself, that's a good take here, by the way, from Brother Juan Gabriel, who is definitely a much more moderate type than we usually talk about here. But again, see, there it is. They deleted it, but these are screenshots, right? So you can see the screenshot. But they asked a question people answered in a way that they didn't seem to expect, says the monk. This is about the worst way they could have handled this. It doesn't quite foster trust in the synodal process. It leaves the impression there are, as some suspect, pre-planned questions and answers, and only the people who give the desired answers will actually be listened to. That's quite unfortunate. Thankfully, though, this isn't the entire picture. I think that what the entire synodal process claims to be has been overshadowed by the lack of subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is the idea that the decision should be made at the most local level possible, whether this is in government or in church. The diocesan and parish system reflects subsidiarity. Priests have a surprising amount of autonomy in their parish, but their bishop will crack down on them if need be. But most of the time they don't need to, right? Things should be handled at the most local level possible. That's what subsidiarity is. It comes from Catholic social teaching. And synodality has eliminated subsidiarity entirely. The monk goes on saying true synodality should be bottom up. In other words, the desired goal of the process may not be seen at the worldwide level, but I do see them at more local levels. Parishes that have thriving ministries, places where the parishioners are fed and nourished by the liturgy, smaller church organizations and charities that serve the needs of their communities, college campuses where students come together for community and prayer. All of these are places where the faithful are truly walking together, truly engaged in mutual listening and growth, truly living the life of the church. So maybe the overly formal synodal process isn't what anyone hoped, but the church is still strong and faithful. Again, much more moderate voice than I usually will cite. But again, he's right when he says this doesn't exactly foster faith in the synodal process. But I mean, everybody was dunking on this thing. So you have me, my Return to Tradition Facebook page. You can go ahead and follow it there if you haven't. Not very synodal of you to delete the tweeted poll, right? Lots of responses to that. This is the kind of thing that you would expect people who have no idea how the internet works to do. Dia Montagna posted this. She says, International Ridicule official Synod X account, Synod VA. They launched a poll on synodality and deleted it because they don't like the 85 to 90% negative results via Info Vaticana. The Friends of Voting and Synodality have received a good dose of their own medicine. The people have spoken, but in the opposite direction to what they expected. Mid-morning Thursday, the official Synod account launched a social media poll on both X, formerly Twitter, and Facebook. The official Synod account asked the following question as a poll. Do you believe that synodality as a path of conversion and reform can enhance the mission and participation of all the baptized? And you get the idea. It did not go well. But yes, they deleted it. And that's just really funny. It's also really sad, but it's really funny too. So call this a win for the good guys. Traditionalist Catholics said Pascendi said the core of modernist system is the laity being the factor of progress in the church. There is literally no other reason they would give laity influence in the doctrine and practice of the faith in terms of deciding what it will be, like synodality proposes, then for that to be the purpose, because this is the worst catechized generation in history, worse than the previous one, which was the worst catechized generation in history. They wouldn't put people who don't have the historic grasp of the faith on average, as all the research data shows, if that wasn't the point. It's like they read Pascendi and used it as a how-to guide to make a new religion. As a French man living abroad, I'm ashamed of what a handful of people are doing to France. I'm sick of the inclusiveness, including and welcoming anything except moral, traditional, or opposite views. Yes, that is, as I pointed out to you, there was a French politician who said, this is not France. This is Paris. This is not France. There's also a Twitter account that I follow that tweets about Catholic prophecy, the account calls itself Alois Erlmeyer, if you're familiar with the videos I've done on him, saying those people, if things keep playing out the way they are in the near future, will be the ones fulfilling that prophecy, which is not exactly good. There's a prophecy about the fate of Paris that is not good, to put it mildly. But yes, so good morning to everybody joining us late. I will remind you, I'll get all this stuff on the Return to Tradition website here for the sources so you can read them all for yourself if you were so inclined. Please pray for the post soul of Wolfgang Smith. He did just go to our Lord, and he was a traditional Catholic and quietly probably one of the great minds of our time that was unsung, and a friend of Malachi Martin's. So please pray for the repose of his soul. Any final thoughts in the live chat here before we move on? The female Casey Royals fan says, remember the original Olympics go back to pagan Greece. Just be glad they were closed to compete. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess there's some. Well, I don't know if you've ever seen like women's summer volleyball. No, thank you. They're technically dressed. Technically. Today is a Saturday. Oh, that reminds me. A week from today is First Saturday. So if you are thinking about keeping the 5 First Saturdays devotion, please start planning for it next Saturday. All right, folks. Thanks very much for tuning in. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.